Hexagonal shelves are a great addition to any room. They're beautiful, they look quite complicated, but let me tell you a secret. They're actually really simple to make. In this video, I will show you how I made these bad boys step by step with some very basic tools and a lot of patience. Of course, showing you every single mistake I made along the way, because would it really be DIY if I didn't make mistakes every single step along the way? Probably not. Anyway, let's get to it. Naturally, the first thing you want to do is to pick your material. I've had some 25mm thick piece of plywood lying around. Plywood, of course, is quite an expensive material to make this from, but it's an offcut, so let's assume it's free. If you have a specific material you want to use, just cut it into equal 6 pieces and that will define the size of your shelf. Alternatively, you can just assume that if one side is 10 centimeters, then the height of it will be around this much. You can do the maths from this, I suppose. You're pretty smart. I believe in you. Now, can you see how beautifully it's burning the wood instead of cutting it smoothly? That's the beauty of a blunt cutting blade that absolutely needs to be changed. But, as you can see here, I have in fact not done that. Once I've cut my material into smaller pieces, I've trimmed them to an equal width. Of course, having a table saw really helps. But with some elbow grease, you can absolutely do the same with a manual saw and a sandpaper. And trust me, I've done it like that before having these tools. Absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. Coming back to my blunt blade, next step is to cut each piece at 60-degree angle. In this case, because the miter saw is counting the difference from 90 degrees, I'm cutting it at 30 degrees from that plane. And creating a lot of smoke and fire in the same time. Poor tool. To save that tool from giving up on me before the new blade arrives, I've decided to try and cut that angle on the table saw. But as you can see in this awkward shot, my slay was in fact not slaying. And due to the amount of wiggle room and movement, I have decided not to do it. I mean, it's better to be slow than to waste material, or even worse, lose a finger or two. Anyway, once I've changed the blade, it was smooth as butter. By the way, I absolutely do not recommend this miter saw. Once all of the pieces are there, align them on the table so that you can feel like they're almost done, while simultaneously realizing how far away the whole thing actually is. It's a beautiful moment. And after that, I've scribed the sides where I'll be marking the joints to ensure I'm drilling in the right place. This may be obvious to some, but I'm pretty dumb and prefer to always scribe where I need to do things. I'm learning from my many mistakes. Sometimes, anyway. Let's be honest. Next step is to scribe where your holes will be. In this case, it's effectively half of the thickness of material from that edge. I used another piece as an angle guide to ensure they're going where they need to. In addition, I've decided to countersink all of these holes to hide the screw that I'll be putting in there. Now, to actually join all of these, on the internal sides I've decided to put wood glue, and from the outside I'll be putting in a long screw to make sure that it won't move. Don't know if I can call myself a woodworker, but as a DIYer with questionable technique, I like to use the things I know work and will not break. Therefore, overdoing things is absolutely in my nature. Here, I'm paying the eternal price for deciding to purchase Phillips screws. But, as usual, it didn't take me long to regret this. And I've decided to use what's called a conformant screws instead, which are typically used for joining particle boards, and I can confirm that they're pretty good in this case. Anyway, joining these was very much a pleasure, because you don't need to put in an ungodly amount of pressure to drive those in, unlike those goddamn Phillips screws. It is somewhat tricky to be certain you're driving them in at the right angle, but with the pilot hole and the fact that there is always some kind of tolerance and flexibility of wood, I wouldn't worry about it that much. Now, once you have all of the pieces aligned and connected, it's time to fill the holes and joints with either a mix of sawdust and wood glue, or in this case wood putty filler, which I had lying around. If there's anything I really like to do, is using the things I have instead of buying new ones. Because I'm cheap like that. Or smart. I suppose it's up to you to decide. Next step was to cut off any excess, or differences around the edges to make sure that these are perfectly parallel. To do this, I've used a pull saw which I recently received as a birthday gift, and I am amazed at how useful these are. Oftentimes, I don't actually even take out a jigsaw because this pull saw can do things quicker and more accurately, which just still blows my mind. Of course, you can do all of that with an electric sander, or even a sandpaper and a lot of manual work, or save yourself the pleasure and pay more attention when you're joining it. But I haven't done that. To cut off the excess putty after filling those holes, I've used the same saw. And then I've decided to sand the whole thing. In this case, I've rounded all of the edges, which was more of a stylistic choice than anything. Also, I've assumed that if I'm to accidentally hit my head on it, then it'd be better if these weren't sharp. After sanding and cleaning it all, it was time to embrace its beauty and put some stain on it. By the way, don't do that. It will create a darker stain where it seeped through, and it will be visible. As usual, I've used a stain that I had from another project. In this case, it was meant to be stained to look like dark oak. Much better choice, of course, is to pour it into a jar, and then to use a cloth or a sponge to spread it. Or like myself here, to use a brush which my wife specifically asked me not to use to do it. Which was an interesting choice. Anyway, the stain gives it a beautiful dark look, and dramatically changes how it looks. Now, once we have the look, it's time to focus on how to attach it to a wall. In my case, I'll be using an invisible wall mount, kind of like the one in the picture somewhere. To do this, I needed to do a couple of things. On the back of the shelf, I've added 3 pilot holes where the mounts will be, 1 at the bottom and 2 at each side. These of course are quite large. I need a long and thick hole, which sadly I cannot make using a hand drill. As such, I have to use a corded drill, mainly because the drill bit is just simply too big to be put in the chuck of my hand drill. Now, assembling it to a wall. In my case, the beautiful wall you see there is being shared with a bathroom, and is not a load-bearing wall, so the critical thing to do is to try to limit any potential disaster, specifically not to drill into a water pipe or a live wire, which wouldn't be an ideal to say the least. I'm using a borrowed digital sensor to check for those, which I absolutely do recommend actually. It's kind of been a lifesaver. Next step is to mark where the holes in the wall should be. In my case, I'm using a small level to be certain that things are, well, level. This is usually a very annoying and frustrating part, as it always takes 10 times longer than it should, at least for me. Once you have marked the holes, making the actual holes is a breeze, at least when you have a borrowed hammer drill. Yeah, I should probably start buying tools instead of borrowing them. Anyway, once fixed to the wall, you just have to put it on and make sure that it's perfectly level. In the case of the bigger one, I had to, let's just say I had to try different arrangements before it was right. And it was. In case of this specific mount, a small screw is needed to make sure that this whole shelf just doesn't fall. The last part was to add a guitar hook, but because the guitar itself is very light, I'll be using a drywall screws instead. In case of this wall, there is a drywall, then a bit of air and then a ceramic brick, which always is a wonder to connect anything to. But that's kind of it, my friends. It was a great little project and was actually really simple to do. But it does require quite a bit of elbow grease. Luckily, once you can do one of these, you can do many more. Thanks for watching.